Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're looking at The Trouble with Testosterone and other essays on the biology of the human predicament by Robert Sapolsky. Robert Sapolsky is a neuroendocrinology researcher and the author of several books, most notably Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst. Sapolsky is a pretty interesting guy. He spent decades studying baboon troops in Africa, and this is how he got much of the data for his books. He'd study the baboons' behaviors while monitoring their various endocrine levels and learning how different hormones and behaviors affect each other, and how their neuroendocrinology and their social roles within the troop are at play in each of the members of the troop. It's pretty interesting stuff because when you're reading something like this, you have to wonder how applicable this research is to humans. I mean, we do share some similarities in our social structures and more so in our brain chemistry to some of our primate relatives. Of course, we aren't quite as closely related to baboons as we are something like a chimpanzee, but our last common ancestor with baboons didn't live too much longer ago than our last common ancestor with chimpanzees. But this work with the baboons only represents some of the contents of this book. The Trouble with Testosterone features 17 essays on human biology and nature, as well as an introduction chapter. I started reading this book right before Determined came out because I wanted to get into the mind of that author before that book. And I have to say, I did enjoy The Trouble with Testosterone. I found most of the essays pretty interesting and I got through them pretty quick. After reading this and Determined and more of Behave, I see that there's some overlap between all three books, and this is something I've noticed when authors are very specialized or conduct their own research. There will be things that they put in all of their books, and personally, I like seeing the same things coming up in different books because it helps to reinforce the stuff I learned. In this case, I'm mostly thinking about something like hormones like testosterone or oxytocin. And most people have an idea of what testosterone and oxytocin do, but it turns out it's much more complicated and much more interesting than we might have thought. This is one of the areas that Sapolsky's research focused on, so there's some really good stuff in this area in each of his books, including this one. Not all of the essays are about hormones. Sapolsky also delves into things like schizophrenia and social interaction, and there's even a chapter on religion. And there's some more personal stuff in here too, like an essay that's about the author's father, and a lot of stuff about Sapolsky's student life. Personally, my favorite essays were the ones that were about the baboons, as well as some of the human biology essays like Why You Feel Crummy When You're Sick, or things that can happen when a first world diet is suddenly introduced to a person or a monkey. This book is a pretty decent length at just under 300 pages. It has a further reading section at the end of each chapter, but it doesn't have any notes or anything other than the essays at the end, so it's just essays straight to the last page of the book, which is something I never see. It has very few pictures, the 17 essays plus introduction, which you can read out of order if you want. So a book like this might be good for travel or something like that. The Trouble with Testosterone was a pretty good book. It wasn't something that I'd call fascinating like the next book I'm going to review. Yeah, don't miss my next book review. But it was interesting, and being a series of essays, it was something different. Sapolsky also wrote Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers and a primate's memoir, and I'll probably get around to reading those as well. After reading this, Determined and part of Behave, I find his stuff pretty interesting, and I'd like to hear more about his work with the baboons. But I think anyone who liked any of his other books would enjoy The Trouble with Testosterone. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're one of the many people who loved Behave, or if you're looking for something interesting that you can read in chunks, check out The Trouble with Testosterone by Robert Sapolsky.